to finish reassembling this old lathe. In this last part, 3 out of 3, I'm gonna reassemble the headstock. I just fixed the headstock to the bed with the long stud bolts. This way it won't tip over, so that makes work a little easier. One final thing I need to do before I can reassemble this headstock is to take out these oilers and clean them. When I got the lathe, I noticed that they had been using grease instead of oil. And also it has been standing outside in the rain, so I want to make sure that there's no dirt in there. I don't know why they use grease instead of oil. Maybe because the oil was pissing out of the sides, because they used a thin motor oil. Alright, so I found out that I can screw in this M8 threaded bolt. Oh, it's quite loose. Lots of grease in there. When you look down the oil hole, you can see that the hole in the bronze bearing doesn't line up. I think it wasn't installed properly, but it might as well have moved. I'll leave it like this. I don't think it's a good idea to start messing with this. I will tell you what I did to the bronze bearings. This is my first time working with bronze bearings. I have 0 experience with these, so look what I do, don't do as I do. The inside is, well, it's smooth, but your nail will catch a little on the inner part of the bearing. There are also a couple of holes where some material got embedded at some time. So what I did first was using this pick and work around in these holes, making sure there was nothing still left in there. Then I took a small knife and went around the holes, making sure that they didn't, that they were flat, that the material didn't got pushed up. Then I took one of these, a new box cutter knife, and I worked it around the whole bearing, taking off very little material. I was hoping to get the high spots of these little bit ridges here. I also did the same for this tapered part here, which takes the thrust load. This part is actually the most damaged. It really catches your nail. On the rear of the bearing, I worked this surface with the box cutter knife, and it was quite badly grooved. I took off quite a bit of material, and since this is I reckon this is not a problem, because the bearing is pushed this way, so this surface is only for keeping things together. The part that rides against this surface, here it is. It was also it also was quite badly worn. It also had a lot of grooves in there. I rubbed this part on a stone till I got it pretty flat. The groove in here, it doesn't look factory original. It's not concentric with the rest of the part. It was probably cut at a later time. that's basically what I did to the bearing, trying to take out as little material as possible, because when you take out too much, the tapered bearing might seize up. I should also tell you what I did to the spindle, well, the bearing part of the spindle. It's not much. The only thing I did is very lightly rub this hard stone file on here, only on the middle part, which is very slightly grooved. It's hardly noticeable. I'm hoping this will help with the oil distribution. And I did the same for this, very slightly rubbing it. This is the rear bearing. It got the same treatment as the front bearing, although it is in a better condition. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed, hoping that I didn't screw up things and all this work will be for nothing. So, a bit of oil. I'm using whey oil that I got with my cheap Chinese lathe. It's pretty thick, but I have no idea if it is the correct oil for this. I should Google these numbers. Maybe somebody knows if this is good oil for well, plain bearings. I'm gonna put in this part first. It's the inner part of the bearing. It feels nice. Here we go. It's to go down. Next is the pulley. It's a little rusty on the inside. I'm going to put a light coat of oil on there. I had it galvanized, but this is cast iron, so it didn't turn out that great. Line up the keyway. I have to take a look at my pictures. Let's see. Now I believe I have all the parts on there in the correct order. Now I gotta push it through some. Oh yeah, now I gotta tighten these up. And this ring has a set screw in here. And there is a small copper part that rides on the threads. And now I'm not sure if I can install it from the outside. I got a little brass part back in there. It was just mushroomed out because of the set screw pushing against it. So I probably could have installed it from the outside. Damn it! Move. This needs to move onto there, onto that register, and the best way to do it is by tightening this round screw over here. But then the spindle starts to turn. So I think my best bet is to install the chuck and put something in there to hold the spindle. Here's a tire iron that might work. I had this chuck apart because it was binding. Also, I did some tear rusting on it. I don't feel comfortable with this. Too much force is needed. I'm gonna take this apart again tomorrow. Turns out the problem is with the keyway. It did fall out at some point, so I must have put it in reverse, and it's slightly higher in one end. I guess it got ground down a little on one end. So when the keyway is in there, the ring doesn't want to line up and move onto the register. I polished the inside of this part, making sure there was no sink on there from the electroplating, and now it goes on there without too much trouble. Of course, now I forgot the belt again, but I'm getting really good at taking this thing apart. Screw the belt. I'm putting this thing back together. I'll probably need to buy a shorter belt anyway. The front bearing gets preloaded by tightening this round nut and then fixing it with the set screw. If anybody knows how tight I should set this bearing, please add it in the comments. I assume I need to allow a bit of play for the bearings heating up, but I have no idea how much. The rear bearing gets preloaded by backing off this round nut, and so it pushes backwards. It doesn't get fixed from the rear because the this gearing that belongs on there, it rides against the spindle and not against the brass bearing. Of course, this doesn't fit anymore, so I'll need to polish the inside. Okay, this gear probably belonged to the chase screw cutting assembly that used to be with this lathe. Unfortunately, it no longer is. I only have a few parts. What it does, it copies a master thread, something like this, from the rear through the back here to the front of the lathe. Here's a picture of a lathe with chase screw cutting. As you can see, there are a whole lot of parts needed to get this thing running. Here's the last part I need to put on this spindle. It's some sort of protector for the bronze bearing. I've been thinking about drilling a small hole in here so I can lubricate the top bearing a bit better. That's it. Well, let's put on the chuck. I already put a light coat of oil on here. It is a bit damaged, but I worked it with a stone file, and well, I'm hoping for the best. Now I only need to reinstall the oilers. Done. I would like to replace these simple oilers with nice drip oilers. I've seen a video on the internet from my Ford boy, and he made his own oilers, which looked very nice, but that's a bit above my skill level at the moment. Maybe something for a future project. So the preload on the bearing is only hand tight, and that's not much because these things are pretty oily. But I was expecting this thing to spin a little freer. It isn't binding anywhere, and there is no play whatsoever, at least none that you can feel. Maybe the oil is a bit too thick, or it's because it's, well, pretty cold here. I will monitor the temperature of the bearings when it gets too hot, and well, hotter than you can hold. I will back off the tension on the bearing. But again, maybe my oil is just a bit too thick. So far, none of it has come out. So that concludes the 3-part series about reassembling this old lathe. Now I gotta dream up a good plan how to mount a motor to this thing. I'll leave you with a few pictures from the final result.